Hey quilters, it's Patti Carey of Pattispatchwork. Thanks for joining the For the Brave Quilt-along, celebrating the 10th anniversary of Northcott's iconic Stonehenge Stars and Stripes collection. Together, we're making this stellar Quilts of Valor size quilt. I hope you've been enjoying the Quilt-along so far. I sure have. This month, we're working on Block 3. Here's what you need to get started. For Block 3, we're going to need the B2, C4, and E4 pieces cut during month 1, along with fabric I. Now, our fabric B is directional, so I'm going to separate them into like piles, with the direction of the print in each pile being the same. I'm going to start with the top triangles to use for step 16. I've got 3 triangles of B, 2 of C, and 7 of E. And I'm going to arrange them in 2 rows, with fabric C in the top row and B in the bottom row. Now I'm going to sew the triangles together. We're going to refer to the tip at the top of page 3 a lot for this block as we align our patches. So every time we have an angle meets a straight edge, we align it 3/8 of an inch, as we do for the first pair. The triangles tips extend 3/8 of an inch beyond the edge at top and bottom edges. Throughout this block, we're going to finger press our seams away from fabric E. We continue across the top row, adding the remaining triangle units. When we have straight meets angle, we align it at 3/8 of an inch beyond the straight edge of the block, and angle meets angle, we align them so that they meet at the 1/4 inch seam line. Again, finger press away from fabric E and continue along, adding the remaining triangle units for our top row. Straight meets angle, 3/8 of an inch, angle meets angle, aligned at the 1/4 inch seam line. I am going to finger press throughout this block. I don't press anything with an iron until I'm done. Now we repeat what we did in the top row in the bottom row, sewing the B2 triangles to the E triangles. I'm going to zip through this, finger pressing my seams away from fabric E, and then we can sew our 2 rows together. Those seams will nest where the triangle tips are. You can actually feel the one triangle will nest inside the other triangle tip. I pin them in place once I feel that they've nested properly. And I've got 2 spots along the row that I'm going to pin, and then align the top and bottom edges so that they cross on the 1/4 inch seam line. I keep my pins in place until I just get to the pin, and then I can remove it. This really helps keep the pieces aligned. I don't want to sew over the pins because that will damage my machine, but I keep them in place just until the end. And those tips extend 1/4 of an inch. And let's take a look. Lovely. I'm going to finger press my seam away from E, that would be towards B with this. And we're going to make a second unit as well. Now it's time to do the unit in step 19, using 3 C triangles, 4 B triangles, and 5 E triangles. And these use the side directional fabrics. I'm actually chain piecing both top and bottom rows at the same time here to speed things up so that I can get this done. And finger pressing away from fabric E as I go. Once they're done, I can add the top row to the bottom row. Again, nesting those triangle tips inside the other ones. This time, the tips of fabric C will align
right on top of the tip of triangle E at both ends of the block, sewing my 1/4 inch seam. And there you go. Now I'm going to trim the top triangles so that they are in line with the angled edge of the side. Next step, I'm going to take my fabric eye square, and I'm going to use an Easy Miter Lone Star tool, the square corner of it, to mark the scant 1/4 inch seam line. If you do not have one of these tools, you can also use a ruler, positioning the 1/4 inch line slightly off the edge of the fabric to mark a hash mark. That is the equivalent to using the square corner. I'm going to repeat that with the triangle units. This time I'm using the angled corner of the Easy Miter tool to mark my scant 1/4 inch seam line. Again, if you do not have one, position your ruler just slightly off the edge of the fabric on both the angled edge and the top edge to mark the hash lines. Now it's simply a case of connecting the dots. The dot on the triangle unit with the dot on the square. Pin them in place. When you do that, there will be 1/8 of an inch dog ear of square extending beyond the angled mitered edge. And that's correct. Now we sew that seam line, sewing from dot to dot and securing the stitches at each end. You want to stitch between the dots but not beyond the dot at either end. I keep my patches aligned, sew towards that dot and get as close as you can without going past it. Then backstitch to secure your stitches. I'm going to add the matching triangles to opposite sides of my center square. Then I pin them out of the way so that I can add the other 2 matching triangle units to the remaining 2 edges. I've marked the 1/4 inch seam line on these as well, so you know what we're going to do. Match dot to dot. And again, you'll see that tiny tip of your fabric eye square extending beyond the angled edge of our triangle unit. Sew from dot to dot, securing the stitches at each end. There's our triangle, our corner. And we start at the dot, not going beyond it. Remove the pin so we don't break our needle. Keep our edges aligned as we sew the edges together and sew toward the dot but not beyond it. Feel free to stop a stitch length before the dot and backstitch. It's not a hole, it's just a stitch length. Once we've got all 4 on, we can sew our angled edges closed. I align the outer tips and I'm going to match the seams at the midpoint. So I line the outer 2 tips, you don't need to backstitch. And those seams at the midpoint will nest beautifully. You notice I don't even pin, they are just nesting. And the 2 seams at the square will also nest nicely. So to the dot, as close as you can get, but not beyond it. That's what causes a pucker. Then backstitch, and there you see I've left a space, but let's take a look. It is not a hole. We sew all 4 of those. I finger press my seams toward the center square and away from fabric E.
And here you have block 3. Make sure to head on over to the Northcott Instagram page to share a photo of your block and enter the month 3 giveaway. You have a chance at some fabulous prizes. There's also a Facebook group, the For the Brave Quilt-along Facebook group, if you'd like to share there. And if you haven't already done so, please pop onto my website, Pattispatchwork, and join the For the Brave Quilt-along newsletter group. In the monthly newsletter, I share extra tips and tricks on how you can get your blocks done. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you back here next month for Block 4.